I am Olivia, 32 years old, and 3 years ago, my sister Rebecca canceled my physical therapy sessions without my knowledge while I was recovering from a severe car accident. When I confronted her, she simply said, "Your pain is all in your head. I'm helping you stop being so dependent." I fought through agonizing pain to recover on my own, building a new life despite my mobility challenges. Then my insurance company contacted me about fraudulent cancellation claims in my name. Today, as I sat across from the insurance investigator, I slid a folder of evidence across the table. She opened it and asked, "Does your sister have any idea what you've documented?" I just shook my head. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had family dismiss your health struggles. Get comfortable because this story about how I fought for my recovery despite betrayal will show you what true resilience really means. Before my accident, my life was perfectly on track. I was working as a marketing director for a tech startup in Seattle, had just been promoted to lead our international campaigns, and was planning a 2-week vacation to Portugal with my best friend Zoe. We had tickets booked for early June, and I spent evenings researching the perfect coastal towns to visit during our trip. That all changed on a rainy Friday evening in March. I was driving home from a late meeting, tired but satisfied with landing a major client. The intersection was just 3 blocks from my apartment when a driver ran a red light, slamming into the driver's side of my car at nearly 50 miles per hour. I have flashes of memory from the accident, the blinding headlights, the deafening crunch of metal, the strange silence after everything stopped moving. The next clear memory is waking up in the hospital with my parents hovering anxiously over my bed. "She's awake," my mother said, her voice breaking with relief as she pressed the call button for the nurse. My father stood silently at the foot of the bed, his face drawn with worry. I tried to sit up and was immediately hit with searing pain down my left side. "Don't move, honey," my mother cautioned, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You have some serious injuries," the doctor explained the damage. 3 broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, a dislocated shoulder, and nerve damage affecting my left leg. The surgery to repair my pelvis had gone well, but recovery would be long and difficult. "You'll need extensive physical therapy," she explained. "At least 6 months of regular sessions, possibly longer. But with consistent work, we expect you to regain most of your mobility." My parents stayed with me for the first week in the hospital, my mother barely leaving my side while my father handled the practical matters: insurance paperwork, conversations with my employer, and arrangements for my apartment. My sister Rebecca arrived on day 3, sweeping in with a bouquet of flowers and stories about her busy life as a financial analyst in Chicago. "I've arranged to work remotely for 2 weeks to help you transition home," she announced, setting the flowers on the windowsill. "Mom and Dad need to get back to Florida, but you'll need someone to manage things. I can handle it." I was grateful for her offer. Rebecca and I had always had a complicated relationship, competitive as children, distant as adults, but I hoped this might bring us closer. She was 3 years older, always the achiever, the planner, the one with everything figured out. While I pursued creative endeavors and eventually found my place in marketing, Rebecca had followed our father's footsteps into finance, projecting an image of perfect control and success. When I was discharged from the hospital, Rebecca helped me settle into my apartment, which she had rearranged to accommodate my temporary wheelchair. She had cleared pathways, moved essential items to accessible heights, and installed the temporary grab bars the occupational therapist had recommended. On the surface, everything seemed perfectly organized. "I've created a schedule for your medications," she explained, showing me a detailed spreadsheet. "And I've arranged for grocery delivery every Tuesday and Friday. Your physical therapy appointments are in the calendar on your phone, 3 times a week at Seattle Rehabilitation Center. They're supposed to be the best." My insurance had approved intensive physical therapy, covering most of the cost of the specialized rehabilitation I needed. The first session was brutal, sweat-soaked and tear-stained, but my therapist, Marcus, was encouraging. "This is the starting point," he said as he helped me through gentle stretches that felt like torture. "Every session gets you closer to independence. The pain you feel now is your body rebuilding." Rebecca drove me to and from that first appointment, waiting in the reception area with her laptop, working remotely as promised. She seemed distracted on the drive home, unusually quiet as I described Marcus's recovery predictions. 6 months to a year before I'm back to normal, I told her. But he thinks I'll be able to walk short distances without assistance within 8 weeks if I stick to the program. She nodded absently, her eyes fixed on the road. That's a long time to be dependent on others. I know it's an imposition, I began, feeling the familiar guilt creep in. The same feeling I'd had as a child whenever I needed something Rebecca didn't think I should have. But I can hire help once you go back to Chicago. I don't expect you to. That's not what I meant, she interrupted. I mean, it's a long time for you to be dependent. It's not healthy psychologically. I was confused by her response but too exhausted from the therapy session to pursue it. When we arrived home, she helped me to the couch, set up my medications and water within reach, and retreated to the guest bedroom where she had set up her temporary office. Something felt off about her behavior, but I attributed it to the stress of caring for an injured sibling while trying to manage her demanding job remotely. That evening, as we ate the dinner she had prepared, Rebecca launched into a detailed account of an article she had read about pain psychology. Did you know that most chronic pain is actually amplified by our mental state? She asked, serving herself another portion of salad. The physical component is often minimal compared to the psychological factors. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'm pretty sure my broken pelvis and nerve damage are very physical, I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite my growing irritation. Initially, yes, she conceded. But long-term pain persistence is different. People who expect to recover quickly often do, while those who see themselves as victims remain disabled longer. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. I don't see myself as a victim, Rebecca. I'm following medical advice for recovery from serious injuries. Of course, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. I'm just saying that mental fortitude plays a bigger role than most people think. You've always been sensitive. There's nothing wrong with that. But maybe this is an opportunity to develop more resilience. The conversation left me feeling invalidated and somehow blamed for my injuries. It was a familiar dynamic from our childhood. Rebecca positioning herself as stronger, more logical, and implicitly superior. I reminded myself that she was helping me during a difficult time and tried to focus on gratitude rather than our old patterns of interaction. The next morning, Rebecca informed me she needed to run errands and would be gone for a few hours. Can I get you anything while I'm out? She asked, keys already in hand. I'm supposed to have PT at 11, I reminded her. Could you drop me off on your way? A strange expression crossed her face. Oh, I thought you knew. I had to reschedule that appointment. Marcus had a conflict. Before I could question this, she continued, it's rescheduled for next week. I added it to your calendar. When I checked my phone after she left, I found no new appointment. I called the rehabilitation center, confused. Hello, this is Olivia Chen. I was supposed to have an appointment with Marcus today, but my sister said it was rescheduled? Let me check, the receptionist replied. After a moment of keyboard clicking, she continued. I don't see any rescheduling, but I do see that your appointment was canceled yesterday afternoon. The note says, patient request, M. I didn't request cancellation, I said, alarm growing. Could you please reinstate it? I can get a rideshare service to bring me. I'm sorry, Ms. Chen, but Marcus has another patient in that slot now. The earliest we can get you in is next Tuesday. I hung up, disturbed and confused. When Rebecca returned, I confronted her about the canceled appointment. The center said you canceled my session, not rescheduled it. They said it was at my request. She set her shopping bags on the counter with deliberate calm. I think you misunderstood. I called to reschedule because I realized I had a video conference that conflicted with your appointment time. They must have recorded it incorrectly. But you told me Marcus had a conflict, I pointed out. Did I? I must have misspoken. She began unpacking groceries, her back to me. Regardless, I've been doing some more reading about recovery protocols. Many experts believe that too much formal physical therapy creates dependency. Learning to move and strengthen on your own is actually more beneficial long-term. I stared at her, incredulous. Rebecca, I have nerve damage. I need professional guidance for rehabilitation. She turned to face me, her expression a practiced blend of concern and authority that I recognized from childhood. The look she gave before explaining why whatever I wanted wasn't good for me. I understand you're scared, Olivia, but pain catastrophizing is a real phenomenon. The more you focus on professional intervention, the longer your recovery will take. She reached for my hand. I'm trying to help you become independent again. Trust me on this. I pulled my hand away, but before I could respond, she continued. Besides, the co-pays for those sessions are expensive, even with your insurance. You need to be practical about finances during your recovery. You can't work full-time right now, remember? The mention of finances struck a nerve. While my company had been supportive, offering part-time remote work during my recovery, my income had been reduced. Rebecca knew I was careful with money, and she had always been the financial authority in our family, following our father's example of practical restraint and careful planning. My health is worth the expense, I said firmly. Please don't cancel any more appointments without discussing it with me first. She agreed with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I wanted to believe her. Perhaps it had been a misunderstanding. Perhaps she genuinely thought she was helping. But something about the situation left me uneasy. A familiar feeling from childhood when Rebecca would decide what was best for me without regard for what I actually needed or wanted. The following week, I managed to attend my rescheduled therapy session, arranging for a rideshare service since Rebecca claimed to have another work conflict. Marcus seemed concerned about the missed appointment. Consistency is crucial in these early stages, he explained as he helped me through exercises that felt marginally easier than the first session. Even a week's gap can set back your progress. I nodded, determined to maintain the schedule despite Rebecca's interference. It won't happen again, I promised, both to him and myself. When I returned home, I found Rebecca on her laptop at the dining table. She glanced up with surprise. You're back already? I was going to pick you up in an hour. I took a rideshare, I explained. The appointment was at 2 o'clock, not 4 o'clock. Oh, she frowned. I must have noted it incorrectly. She closed her laptop. How was it? Still as painful? Better, actually, I admitted. Marcus says I'm making good progress despite the missed session. Rebecca's expression tightened slightly. That's what they always say to keep you coming back. It's good business for them. I ignored the comment, too tired to argue. The following days fell into an uneasy pattern. Rebecca continued to help with meals and household management, but there was a growing tension between us. She would make subtle comments about my dependency on physical therapy, suggesting alternative approaches she had researched online, herbal supplements, mindfulness techniques, and obscure exercise regimens not recommended by my doctors. 2 days before my next scheduled therapy session, I overheard her on the phone in the guest bedroom, her voice low but clearly audible through the partially open door. Yes, I'm calling on behalf of my sister Olivia Chen. I need to cancel her ongoing physical therapy appointments. A pause. All of them, yes. She's decided to pursue alternative treatments. Another pause. No, she doesn't need to reschedule at this time. If she changes her mind, she'll contact you directly. I sat in stunned silence in my wheelchair, trying to process what I'd heard. When she emerged from the bedroom, I confronted her immediately. You were canceling my therapy appointments? All of them? Without even telling me? Rebecca didn't deny it, which surprised me more than the action itself. Instead, she sat down across from me, her expression serious. Olivia, I've been trying to help you see this gently, but you're not getting it. You're becoming psychologically dependent on these sessions. The physical benefits are minimal compared to exercises you could do at home. Quote, That's not your decision to make, I said, my voice shaking with anger. These are my medical treatments, prescribed by my doctors. You have no right to cancel them. I'm trying to help you, she insisted. You've always leaned too heavily on external support. First it was mom and dad, then it was your friends in college handling everything for you, and now it's these therapists. You need to learn to stand on your own, literally and figuratively. Her characterization of my life was so distorted that for a moment I couldn't respond. I had been independent since college, building my career through hard work and determination. My parents had helped with tuition, as they had for Rebecca, but I had managed my own life, made my own decisions, and built my own success. "You need to leave," I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. "I appreciate your help these past 2 weeks, but I'll arrange for professional assistance from now on." "You're overreacting," she sighed. "This is exactly the emotional response that keeps you dependent. You get upset when challenged and retreat to what feels comfortable, rather than what will actually help you grow." "What will help me grow is regaining my physical abilities through professional therapy," I countered. "What will help me grow is not having someone undermine my recovery by canceling my medical appointments behind my back." The argument escalated, with Rebecca insisting she knew what was best for me and that I was simply resistant to her tough love approach. She referenced childhood incidents as evidence of my pattern of dependency and suggested that my accident might be, quote, "the wake-up call you needed to finally develop true resilience." By evening, she had packed her things. "You'll realize I was trying to help," she said as she stood at the door, suitcase in hand. "When you're ready to acknowledge that, call me." "Don't expect that call anytime soon," I replied, holding back tears until the door closed behind her. Alone in my apartment, I faced the daunting reality of managing my recovery without help. My parents were in Florida, unable to travel again so soon after their previous visit due to my father's own health issues. Most of my friends worked full-time and couldn't provide the daily assistance I needed. I had some savings, but as Rebecca had pointed out, my reduced income meant I needed to be careful with expenses. That night, I made calls and sent emails, piecing together a support system. My company agreed to increase my remote hours, providing additional income. A neighbor in my building, Elena, offered to check in daily and help with groceries. My friend Zoe arranged her schedule to drive me to medical appointments twice a week. And I hired a part-time home health aide for the remaining essential assistance, stretching my budget to cover the cost. The next morning, I called the rehabilitation center to reinstate my appointments, only to discover Rebecca had done more damage than I realized. "I'm showing that all your approved sessions have been canceled," the administrator explained. "And there's a note here indicating you've elected to discontinue treatment against medical advice." "That's not true," I insisted. "My sister made those calls without my knowledge or consent. I need to restart my therapy immediately." "I understand, Ms. Chen, but unfortunately, we'll need to contact your insurance company to reinstate the approval." When treatments are canceled this way, especially with the "against medical advice" notation, it can trigger a review process. It took 3 days of persistent calls, emails, and documentation to restore my therapy schedule. During this time, I relied on online videos and the exercises Marcus had already taught me, pushing through pain to maintain what progress I had made. When I finally returned to the rehabilitation center, Marcus noted I had lost ground. "Your range of motion has decreased," he observed as he helped me through basic movements. "And the muscle tone we started building has diminished." What happened? I explained the situation briefly, embarrassed to admit my sister had sabotaged my treatment. Marcus was understanding but concerned. "Family dynamics can complicate recovery," he acknowledged. "But your commitment to returning so quickly is a good sign. We'll get back on track." The incident with Rebecca forced me to take complete ownership of my recovery. I created detailed journals tracking my progress, maintained meticulous records of all medical instructions, and developed my own supplementary exercise routine to practice between formal sessions. The cancellation had been a setback, but it also ignited a determination to prove Rebecca wrong, to demonstrate that professional treatment was essential to my recovery, not a crutch I was using to avoid developing resilience. As weeks passed, my improvements accelerated. I progressed from wheelchair to walker, from walker to cane, celebrating each milestone with the network of supporters I had assembled. My parents visited monthly, my mother helping with household tasks, and my father, now seeing my progress firsthand, admitted he had harbored some of the same doubts as Rebecca initially. "I thought maybe she had a point about people becoming dependent on therapy," he confessed during one visit. "But seeing how you've improved with the professional guidance, I understand now. You're doing it the right way." Rebecca and I communicated minimally during this time, occasional text messages, brief and superficial. She asked how I was doing but never acknowledged the harm her actions had caused or apologized for overstepping. I provided polite but vague updates, unwilling to share the details of my progress with someone who had tried to derail it. 6 months after the accident, I reached a significant milestone, walking unassisted for short distances. My left leg still had noticeable weakness, and I continued to use a cane for longer walks, but the progress was remarkable given the severity of my injuries. Marcus was pleased but realistic. "You've worked incredibly hard," he said during an assessment session. "Your determination has accelerated your recovery beyond what we initially projected. But you still have work to do to regain full strength and endurance." I had just been approved for another 3 months of therapy when the letter arrived from my insurance company. The official-looking envelope contained a notice of investigation into potentially fraudulent activity related to my claims. According to their records, several cancellations and reinstatements had raised red flags in their system, particularly the notes indicating I had chosen to discontinue treatment against medical advice, followed by requests to resume the same treatment days later. The letter requested documentation explaining these inconsistencies and warned that failure to resolve the matter could result in denial of coverage for ongoing treatment. It also mentioned potential referral to their fraud investigation unit if satisfactory explanation wasn't provided. I sat at my kitchen table, reading and rereading the letter with growing anxiety. The implications were serious, not just for my continued treatment, but potentially for my financial stability if the insurance company decided to retroactively deny claims they had already paid. My first call was to Marcus, who immediately offered to provide documentation of my consistent participation in therapy once I returned, and my progress under professional guidance. "This isn't uncommon when there are irregular patterns in treatment," he assured me. "With proper documentation from your medical team, it should be resolvable." My second call was to my primary care physician, Dr. Patel, who had coordinated my care since the accident. She also agreed to provide records supporting the medical necessity of my treatment and my compliance with recommendations. But as I gathered documentation, a disturbing possibility emerged. The cancellations had all been made by Rebecca, using my name and claiming to be acting on my behalf. In the eyes of the insurance company, those cancellations, particularly with the against medical advice notation, looked like I was gaming the system somehow, perhaps seeking prescriptions while avoiding actual treatment, or creating a paper trail for disability claims. I needed to prove that I hadn't made those cancellations, which meant I needed to document Rebecca's interference. This realization hit me with a wave of conflicted emotions. Providing evidence against my sister felt like a betrayal of family loyalty, yet her actions had put my health and financial security at risk. After careful consideration, I began assembling a folder of evidence. I had the original text messages from Rebecca mentioning the canceled appointments. I had emails to the rehabilitation center attempting to reinstate my therapy after she left. I had my detailed recovery journal noting the setback caused by the missed sessions. And, most significantly, I had recordings of 2 phone calls with the rehabilitation center's administrative staff confirming that the cancellations had been made by someone identifying herself as my sister. The insurance company assigned an investigator to my case, a woman named Valerie, who specialized in medical claim discrepancies. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment, as I was still uncomfortable driving long distances. On the day of the meeting, I dressed professionally, determined to present myself as the responsible, organized person I was, rather than the dependency-prone victim Rebecca had described. I arrived early, setting up at a corner table with my folder of evidence and a tablet containing my electronic documentation. Valerie arrived precisely on time, a middle-aged woman with a practical haircut and attentive eyes. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and a direct manner that I found reassuring. This wasn't someone who would be easily misled, but neither did she seem to have predetermined that fraud had occurred. "Ms. Chen, I appreciate you meeting with me," she began, opening a laptop. "As outlined in our letter, we've identified some unusual patterns in your treatment history that require clarification. Can you walk me through what happened?" I took a deep breath and began my explanation, starting with the accident and my initial treatment plan, then detailing Rebecca's arrival and her gradual interference culminating in the cancellation of all my therapy appointments. I explained her psychological theory about dependency and her belief that she was helping me by forcing independence. I have documentation supporting this, I added, sliding the folder across the table. Phone records, emails, text messages, and statements from my treatment providers about the impact of these canceled sessions on my recovery. Valerie opened the folder, examining each document carefully. When she reached the transcripts of my calls with the rehabilitation center confirming Rebecca had made the cancellations, she looked up with a sharp gaze. "Does your sister have any idea what you've documented?" I shook my head. "No, we've had minimal contact since she left. She still believes she was helping me." Valerie continued reviewing the materials, occasionally making notes on her laptop. "This is unusually thorough documentation," she observed. "Most people don't keep such detailed records." "The accident changed how I approach everything," I explained. "When you suddenly lose your independence, you become very conscious of what you need to do to regain it. And when someone interferes with that process, you become even more determined to protect your recovery." She nodded, seeming to understand. "And your current status? You're still in physical therapy?" "Yes, twice weekly now. I've progressed to walking unassisted for short distances, but I still need ongoing rehabilitation for the nerve damage in my left leg. My medical team projects another 6 months of professional therapy, transitioning to a maintenance program after that." After nearly 2 hours of discussion and review of my documentation, Valerie closed her laptop. "Ms. Chen, based on what you've provided, I'll be recommending that the investigation be closed with a finding of no fraudulent activity on your part. The evidence clearly shows the cancellations were made without your knowledge or consent." Relief washed over me. "So my continued treatment will be covered?" "Yes, according to your policy terms. I'll make sure the flags are removed from your account." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "If I may offer a personal observation, you've handled this situation with remarkable composure. Many people would have given up on the treatment after such interference, especially from family." "I couldn't afford to give up," I replied simply. Recovery was too important. As Valerie gathered her things to leave, she asked one final question. "Will you be pursuing any action against your sister for her interference?" There could be grounds for it, given the potential financial harm and the documented medical setback. The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on clearing my name with the insurance company that I hadn't considered the possibility of holding Rebecca legally accountable. "I haven't decided," I answered honestly. "Right now I'm focused on my recovery." She nodded. "Understandable. Well, you'll receive formal notification about the conclusion of our investigation within 2 weeks. In the meantime, continue your treatment as prescribed." As I watched her leave, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that my insurance coverage was secure, pride in my thorough documentation, but also a lingering sadness about the fracture in my relationship with Rebecca. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and part of me wished she could understand the harm her actions had caused instead of believing she had been helping me. After the meeting with Valerie, I sat in the coffee shop for nearly an hour, watching people come and go, contemplating how completely my life had changed since the accident. 9 months earlier, I had been planning a vacation to Portugal, focused on career advancement, and maintaining a polite but distant relationship with my sister. Now I was documenting her betrayal to protect my medical care, celebrating the ability to walk short distances without assistance, and rebuilding my life in ways I never anticipated. On my way home, I received a text from my mother. "Rebecca mentioned some issue with your insurance. Is everything okay?" I sighed, recognizing the pattern. Rebecca had clearly told our parents her version of events, positioning herself as the concerned sister and me as the ungrateful patient. It was a familiar dynamic, Rebecca controlling the narrative, especially with our parents. I called my mother that evening after my daily exercises. "The insurance issue is being resolved," I explained, keeping my tone neutral. There was some confusion about appointment cancellations. "Rebecca said she was just trying to help you become more independent," my mother ventured. "She's worried you're becoming too reliant on these treatments." The comment ignited a spark of anger I thought I had controlled. "Mom, Rebecca canceled essential medical treatments without my knowledge or consent. My recovery was set back weeks because of her interference. That's not help. That's harmful control. Oh, my mother sounded genuinely surprised. She said you had agreed to try alternative approaches but then changed your mind. This revelation confirmed what I had suspected. Rebecca had created an entirely different narrative for our parents, one that preserved her image as the helpful, knowledgeable older sister. That's not what happened, I said firmly. I never agreed to cancel my therapy. She made those decisions unilaterally, against my explicit wishes. The silence on the line told me my mother was processing this contradiction. I see, she finally said. Your father and I wondered why you would stop prescribed treatments. It didn't sound like you. It wasn't me, I confirmed. And now the insurance company is investigating, because the pattern of cancellations and reinstatements looks suspicious to them. Oh, Olivia, my mother's voice filled with concern. Will this affect your coverage? I met with their investigator today and provided documentation showing Rebecca made those cancellations without my knowledge. They should clear the matter soon. Another lengthy silence followed. I had no idea, my mother finally said. Rebecca told us she was helping coordinate your care, that you were overwhelmed and needed her to manage the medical aspects. I closed my eyes, controlling my frustration. That's not true, Mom. I was fully engaged in my treatment plan from the beginning. Rebecca decided, without consulting my doctors or respecting my wishes, that I would recover better without professional help. She believes my pain is largely psychological and that I'm using therapy as a crutch. That doesn't make sense, my mother said, genuine confusion in her voice. Your injuries were severe. Of course you need proper medical care. The validation felt surprisingly important. Thank you for understanding that. Rebecca doesn't seem to. Your father and I will talk to her, my mother promised. This isn't acceptable behavior. I appreciate that, I said, but I need to handle this myself. Rebecca and I have issues to resolve directly. After we hung up, I realized this was perhaps the first time I had explicitly asked my parents not to intervene in a conflict with my sister, a small but significant step in changing our family dynamics. The following week brought a formal letter from the insurance company confirming what Valerie had told me. The investigation was closed, no fraudulent activity had been found on my part, and my coverage would continue uninterrupted. The letter included a note advising me to be vigilant about who had access to my medical information and suggesting I consider placing additional security measures on my accounts. This official resolution should have brought complete relief, but instead, it crystallized a decision I had been avoiding. I needed to confront Rebecca directly about her actions and their consequences, not just for my own closure, but to ensure she understood the seriousness of what she had done and wouldn't repeat this behavior with anyone else. I scheduled the conversation carefully, choosing a Sunday afternoon when neither of us would be rushed by work commitments. I prepared thoroughly, writing down key points I wanted to make and practicing how to express them calmly but firmly. This wasn't about venting anger. It was about clearly establishing boundaries and consequences. When I called, Rebecca answered with her usual brisk efficiency. Olivia, this is a surprise. How are you progressing? We need to talk about what happened with my physical therapy, I said, skipping the small talk. I'd prefer to have this conversation once, thoroughly, rather than letting it fester. I've been waiting for you to realize I was trying to help, she replied, her tone suggesting she'd expected this call to be an apology from me. Sometimes people need to be pushed out of their comfort zones to truly recover. That's not your decision to make. I countered evenly. The insurance company investigated me for potential fraud because of the cancellations you made without my consent. There was a moment of silence before she responded. That's ridiculous. I was acting as your caregiver and making decisions in your best interest. No, Rebecca, you were imposing your unqualified opinions against medical advice and without my consent. The investigation is now closed, and they've confirmed I wasn't responsible for the suspicious pattern of cancellations and reinstatements. But it could have resulted in denial of coverage for treatments I desperately need. You're overreacting, she insisted. Insurance companies routinely look into unusual patterns. It's standard procedure. I'm not calling to debate whether I'm overreacting, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm calling to make it absolutely clear that what you did was harmful to my recovery. and put my financial security at risk. You violated my trust and my autonomy at a time when I was already vulnerable. I was trying to help you develop independence, she argued. You've always relied too heavily on others instead of developing inner strength. That's your narrative, not reality, I replied. I've built a successful career, maintained healthy relationships, and now I'm recovering from life-threatening injuries, all of which require significant inner strength. What you call dependency is actually me wisely using available resources for recovery, exactly as medical professionals advised. The conversation continued in this circular pattern, with Rebecca refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing and repeatedly casting her actions as necessary intervention for my own good. She characterized my anger as emotional overreaction and suggested the setback in my recovery was due to my negative mindset rather than the missed therapy sessions. After nearly an hour, I realized we had reached an impasse. Rebecca's view of me and of herself was too deeply entrenched to be changed by a single conversation, no matter how well prepared I was. I needed to accept this reality and set clear boundaries regardless of her recognition of them. I understand we see this situation differently, I said finally, but I need you to understand 3 things clearly. First, you will never again make medical decisions on my behalf under any circumstances. Second, I will not allow you to characterize me as psychologically weak or dependent to our parents or anyone else. And third, our relationship can only continue if you respect these boundaries absolutely. That sounds like an ultimatum, she replied coldly. It's a boundary, I corrected. I'm telling you what I need to maintain a relationship with you. What you do with that information is your choice. After we hung up, I felt drained but clearer. The conversation hadn't gone as I'd hoped. There was no breakthrough, no moment of genuine understanding from Rebecca, but I had stated my boundaries explicitly and without compromise. For the first time in our relationship, I had prioritized my needs over her approval or understanding. The weeks that followed brought a new phase in my recovery. I progressed to using a cane only for longer distances or on days when fatigue or pain were particularly challenging. My physical therapist, Marcus, introduced more advanced exercises targeting the lingering nerve damage in my left leg, and I began aquatic therapy to build strength with less strain on my healing bones. The progress was steady but not linear. Some days brought noticeable improvements, walking farther, managing stairs more easily, experiencing less pain during movement. Other days felt like setbacks, with increased pain or fatigue forcing me to scale back activities. On those difficult days, I would sometimes hear Rebecca's voice in my head, suggesting the pain was psychological, that I was allowing myself to be weak. In those moments, I developed a new practice. I would acknowledge the critical thought, recognize it as Rebecca's voice, not my own, and consciously replace it with what I knew to be true. Recovery from serious injuries follows a natural ebb and flow. Listening to my body's signals was wisdom, not weakness, and using available medical resources was smart self-care, not dependency. This mental reframing became as important to my recovery as the physical exercises. I realized how deeply Rebecca's attitudes had affected me throughout our lives, creating a harsh inner critic that questioned my needs and labeled self-care as self-indulgence. Dismantling these internalized criticisms became part of my healing process. 3 months after the insurance investigation, I reached another significant milestone. I returned to work in the office 2 days a week, continuing remote work the other 3 days. My company had been exceptionally supportive throughout my recovery, but rejoining the physical workspace, even part-time, marked an important transition. My first day back, my team decorated my desk with welcome signs and arranged a lunch celebration. My boss, Diane, who had advocated for flexible accommodations throughout my recovery, gave a brief toast. Olivia's return reminds us of what resilience truly means, she said, raising her glass. Not just bouncing back, but moving forward with newfound strength and perspective. Her words resonated deeply. I had indeed gained new perspective through this challenging year. I understood my own strength more clearly, recognized toxic dynamics I had previously accepted as normal, and learned to advocate for my needs without apology. The physical recovery was ongoing, but the personal growth felt equally significant. That evening, I received a text from an unexpected source, my father. Unlike my mother, who maintained regular contact throughout my recovery, my father had been more peripheral, uncomfortable with illness and disability in the way many men of his generation were. His message was brief but meaningful. "Your mother told me about your return to the office. Proud of your determination. Love, Dad." Coming from my emotionally reserved father, this simple acknowledgement felt momentous. I wondered if his perspective on Rebecca's interference had shifted as well, but didn't want to raise the issue and potentially damage their relationship. Some family dynamics were beyond my control or responsibility to change. Rebecca and I maintained minimal contact during this period. Occasional text messages about family matters, brief exchanges during the monthly video calls our mother insisted on for family unity. She never directly acknowledged or apologized for her interference with my treatment, but she no longer offered unsolicited opinions about my recovery or questioned my approach to rehabilitation. 1 year after the accident, I scheduled a comprehensive assessment with my medical team to evaluate my progress and plan the next phase of treatment. The results were encouraging. Approximately 85% recovery of function in my left leg, significant reduction in chronic pain, and greatly improved stamina for daily activities. The nerve damage remained the most persistent issue, causing occasional numbness and reduced sensation in my left foot, but even this had improved beyond initial projections. Dr. Patel reviewed the results with me in her office, her expression pleased as she compared current scans and assessments to those taken immediately after the accident. "You've made remarkable progress, Olivia," she said. "Better than we anticipated given the severity of your injuries." "What about the remaining issues?" I asked. "The nerve damage and occasional pain, will those continue to improve?" "Nerve regeneration is slow and unpredictable," she explained. "You may see continued improvement over the next year, but some residual effects might be permanent. The important thing is that you've regained functional mobility and significantly reduced pain levels. Your consistent participation in therapy, despite the interruptions, has been crucial to this outcome." The reference to interruptions was delicate but clear. We both knew how Rebecca's cancellations had temporarily derailed my progress. "I've been thinking about that period a lot lately," I admitted. "How different my recovery might have been if I hadn't fought to restart therapy immediately." Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. "Medical research is very clear on this point. Early, consistent rehabilitation is essential for optimal recovery from traumatic injuries. The patients who achieve the best outcomes are those who follow through with recommended treatments, especially in those critical first months." My recovery wasn't complete, and some effects of the accident would likely remain with me permanently. But I had reclaimed my life, my autonomy, and my understanding of what true support actually means. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the many lessons this challenging year had taught me, that resilience comes in many forms, not all of them visible, that true help empowers rather than controls, that setting boundaries is an act of self-respect, and that recovery, whether physical, emotional, or relational, is rarely linear but always possible. The journey had been painful in ways I never anticipated, revealing family dynamics I had previously accepted as normal and forcing me to advocate for myself when I was most vulnerable. But it had also shown me my own strength, connected me with genuine support, and freed me from patterns of interaction that had limited me long before my physical injuries. Tomorrow would bring another day of exercises, another step in my ongoing recovery. But tonight, I celebrated how far I had already come, not just in walking without assistance, but in standing firmly in my own truth, despite those who would rewrite it for their convenience. That, perhaps, was the most significant recovery of all. 18 months after my accident, life had established a new rhythm. I had returned to full-time work at the office, though I still maintained the option to work remotely when needed. My physical therapy had transitioned from intensive rehabilitation to maintenance. Once-weekly sessions focused on strengthening the permanent nerve damage in my left leg and preventing compensatory issues in other muscle groups. The most visible reminder of the accident was my custom carbon fiber cane, which I used primarily for longer distances, or on days when my energy was depleted. I had initially resisted using it, concerned it would mark me as permanently disabled, but Marcus had reframed my thinking. "This isn't a symbol of limitation," he explained while adjusting the height perfectly to my stance. "It's a tool that extends your capabilities." His perspective helped me embrace the cane as part of my identity rather than a reminder of loss. I invested in several styles: a sleek black one for professional settings, a colorful hand-painted design for casual outings, and a collapsible travel version that had accompanied me on my rescheduled trip to Portugal, finally taken the previous summer with Zoe. That trip had been a personal triumph, navigating cobblestone streets and steep hillside villages with my cane, modifying activities when needed, but participating fully in the experience. Each morning of the vacation, I had awakened with the same thought: a year ago, this would have been impossible. The gratitude that accompanied this realization made every view more breathtaking, every meal more delicious, every interaction more meaningful. On a crisp October morning, I received an unexpected email from the insurance company. My heart raced momentarily, the memory of the previous investigation still capable of triggering anxiety. But the message wasn't about my claim at all. Instead, it was an invitation to participate in a panel discussion at their upcoming healthcare symposium, focusing on patient advocacy and navigation of the insurance system during complex recoveries. "Your case provided an excellent example of proper documentation and self-advocacy," the email explained. "We believe other patients could benefit from hearing your experience and strategies." The invitation surprised me. I had never considered that my meticulous documentation and persistent self-advocacy might be valuable to others facing similar challenges. After consulting with my legal team to ensure there would be no negative implications for my ongoing coverage, I accepted. Preparing for the symposium required reflecting on my journey more analytically than I had before, identifying the specific strategies that had protected my care, the documentation systems I had developed, and the boundaries I had established. This process revealed how much I had grown through necessity. The organizational skills I had developed to manage my recovery were now assets I used in my professional life. The boundary setting I had learned with Rebecca now informed all my relationships. The event was held at a downtown hotel conference center with several hundred attendees, a mix of healthcare providers, insurance professionals, patient advocates, and individuals managing complex medical conditions. My panel included a healthcare attorney, a patient rights advocate, and a claims processing supervisor. I was the only actual patient represented. When it was my turn to speak, I shared my story straightforwardly: the accident, the approved treatment plan, Rebecca's unauthorized cancellations, and the subsequent investigation. I focused particularly on the documentation systems I had created and the specific language I had used to advocate for myself with medical providers and insurance representatives. The key insight I gained, I explained to the attentive audience, was that in a complex medical situation, no one cares about your recovery as much as you do. Not because others don't care, many absolutely do, but because you are the only constant presence throughout the entire journey. Doctors change, insurance representatives rotate, even family support fluctuates. But you remain the one constant advocate for your own care. I demonstrated the recovery journal I had maintained, now digitized as an app prototype I was developing with a tech friend. This system allowed me to track not just physical progress but also all communications about my care: who I spoke with, when, what was discussed, what was promised, and what actually happened. This documentation became crucial when my treatment was disrupted. During the Q&A session, a woman in a wheelchair raised her hand. "Did you ever resolve things with your sister?" she asked. "I'm dealing with a similar situation with my brother who thinks he knows better than my doctors, and I'm struggling to maintain both my treatment and the relationship." It was a deeply personal question that I hadn't anticipated, touching on aspects of my experience I hadn't addressed in my presentation. The audience seemed to collectively lean forward, interested in this human dimension, beyond the technical aspects of documentation and advocacy. "That's still evolving," I answered honestly. "We maintain limited contact, but with strict boundaries around my medical decisions. What I've learned is that some people confuse control with care. They genuinely believe they're helping when they override your choices, and that conviction makes it nearly impossible for them to see the harm they're causing." I paused, considering how to articulate the complex resolution I had reached. I've accepted that my sister may never fully understand or acknowledge the impact of her actions. But I no longer need that acknowledgement to move forward. I've reclaimed my autonomy and established non-negotiable boundaries. The relationship exists within those boundaries or not at all. My response resonated beyond what I expected. Several audience members nodded in recognition, and after the panel concluded, a line formed of people wanting to share similar experiences with well-meaning family members who had undermined their medical care through control, dismissal of symptoms, or insistence on unproven alternative treatments. One man tearfully described his parents refusing to believe his chronic pain condition was real until he was hospitalized with complications. A woman shared how her husband had flushed her prescribed medications, believing prayer alone should be sufficient for her depression. Another described siblings who insisted her autoimmune condition was all in her head, despite clear medical evidence to the contrary. These stories shocked me with their familiarity. The specific conditions differed, but the underlying dynamic was identical to what I had experienced with Rebecca. Loved ones substituting their judgment for medical expertise and the patient's own experience, often with devastating consequences. The symposium organizer approached as I was speaking with the last few attendees. "Your presentation clearly struck a nerve," she observed. "We didn't anticipate the personal dimension would resonate so strongly, but clearly there's a need for this conversation. Would you consider developing this into a workshop for our patient advocacy program?" The request was unexpected but intriguing. I had never considered turning my experience into something that could directly help others. "I'd need to think about what that would entail," I replied. "But I'm definitely interested in exploring the possibility." That evening in my hotel room, I found myself unable to sleep, mind buzzing with the stories I had heard and the possibility of transforming my personal ordeal into something constructive for others. I opened my laptop and began outlining what a workshop might cover: documentation systems, effective communication with medical providers, strategies for countering interference, legal protections for patients, and psychological techniques for maintaining boundaries with well-meaning but harmful family members. As the outline took shape, I realized I was designing exactly the resource I had needed during my own recovery: a comprehensive guide to navigating not just the medical and insurance systems, but also the complex human factors that could derail proper treatment. By morning, I had drafted a proposal for a 3-hour workshop titled "Protecting Your Care: Self-Advocacy for Patients with Complex Conditions." I emailed it to the symposium organizer before checking out of the hotel, expecting a response within a few days. Instead, she called within hours, enthusiastic about the concept. "This addresses a gap in our current programming," she explained. "We have plenty of resources on technical aspects of patient advocacy, but very little on navigating the family dynamics that often complicate recovery. How soon could you develop this into a full curriculum?" The question caught me off guard. I had envisioned a one-time workshop, not an ongoing program. "I'd need to consider the time commitment," I hedged. "My primary career is still in marketing." "Of course," she acknowledged. "But consider this. We could record the initial workshop, develop supporting materials, and potentially scale it for wider distribution. Your experience could help thousands of patients protect their care from well-intentioned interference." The possibility was compelling. I agreed to develop a pilot workshop for the following month, with the understanding that we would evaluate its impact before discussing broader implementation. As I drove home from the hotel, I found myself energized by this unexpected direction. The accident that had nearly destroyed my life was now opening doors to help others in ways I never could have anticipated. I dove into research, expanding my personal experience with academic studies on family dynamics in healthcare, interviews with patient advocates, and consultations with healthcare providers who had witnessed similar interference patterns. The project consumed my evenings and weekends, but the work felt purposeful in a way nothing had since before the accident. 3 weeks into development, I received a text from my mother. "Rebecca is coming for Thanksgiving. She hopes you'll join us. Time to mend fences?" I stared at the message, conflicted emotions surfacing. Our family's Thanksgiving tradition had always been important to me, but the prospect of spending it with Rebecca, pretending all was well when fundamental issues remained unresolved, felt dishonest. I called my mother rather than responding by text, wanting to explain my hesitation clearly. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that, Mom. I began. Rebecca has never acknowledged the harm she caused or apologized for interfering with my treatment. She's your sister, my mother replied, her tone suggesting this biological fact should override all other considerations. Family is family. Being family doesn't grant automatic access to my life, I said firmly, especially after what happened. My mother sighed. She says you've cut her out completely, that you refuse to speak to her about anything important. Is that true? I've established boundaries about what I'm willing to discuss with her, I clarified. My medical care is off limits as a topic because she violated my trust in that area. And yes, I've limited our interactions because she continues to dismiss the seriousness of what she did. People make mistakes, Olivia. Holding grudges only hurts you in the end. I recognized the familiar pattern. My mother mediating conflicts by encouraging the wounded party to forgive without requiring accountability from the one who caused harm. It had been her approach throughout our childhood, and it had enabled Rebecca's behavior for decades. This isn't about grudges, I explained patiently. It's about protecting myself from someone who has shown they don't respect my autonomy. Rebecca believes she has the right to override my decisions for my own good, and until that fundamental attitude changes, I need to maintain distance for my well-being. We circled this issue several times, my mother unable to see beyond her desire for harmonious family gatherings, me unwilling to sacrifice my boundaries for the appearance of reconciliation. Eventually, we reached a compromise. I would come for dessert after the main Thanksgiving meal, limiting my interaction with Rebecca while still participating in the family tradition to some degree. As I hung up, I realized this conversation was directly related to the workshop I was developing. The pressure to prioritize family harmony over personal boundaries, to forgive without accountability, to pretend harm hadn't occurred for the sake of social comfort. These were exactly the forces that made patients vulnerable to interference with their care. I immediately added a new section to the workshop curriculum, addressing these specific pressures and offering language to counter them effectively. The personal and professional were merging in unexpected ways, each informing and strengthening the other. The pilot workshop took place at a community health center, with 20 participants ranging from newly diagnosed patients to long-term survivors of chronic conditions. Many brought family members, supportive ones they wanted to include in their advocacy strategies, not the ones who had interfered with their care. I began by sharing my story, more comprehensively than I had at the symposium, including the psychological impact of having my experiences dismissed and my autonomy violated. Then I introduced the frameworks and tools I had developed, adapting them for various health conditions and personal circumstances. The response exceeded my expectations. Participants engaged deeply with the material, sharing their own experiences and helping each other adapt the strategies to their specific situations. Several became emotional when discussing the psychological aspects, the self-doubt that creeps in when loved ones dismiss your symptoms, the isolation of fighting for appropriate care when those closest to you undermine it, the exhaustion of constantly justifying your medical needs. What you're describing isn't just a collection of strategies, commented a woman managing multiple sclerosis. It's a fundamental shift in how patients see themselves in relation to their care and their support systems. You're giving us permission to trust our own experiences and protect our treatment plans, even when that means setting difficult boundaries with people we love. Her insight crystallized something I had been approaching intuitively. The workshop wasn't just about tactical approaches to documentation and communication. It was about reclaiming agency in a situation where vulnerability often leads to surrendering control to others, whether medical professionals or family members. After the workshop concluded, the health center's patient education coordinator approached me. "We need this program on an ongoing basis," she stated. "Would you consider training our staff to deliver it, or returning quarterly to present it yourself?" Similar requests followed from 2 hospitals and a rehabilitation center that had sent representatives to observe the pilot. Suddenly, I was facing decisions about whether to expand this unexpected side project into something more substantial, possibly even a secondary career path alongside my marketing work. The question became more pressing when my boss, Diane, called me into her office a week after the pilot workshop. "I saw the write-up about your presentation in the healthcare newsletter," she began, sliding a printed article across her desk. I hadn't been aware that someone had published an account of the workshop, and I scanned it quickly, relieved to see it was positive. I didn't realize you were developing this kind of programming. Diane continued. It's impressive work. It's just a side project that grew out of my experience. I explained. I never expected it to gain traction this way. Diane leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. Have you considered how this might align with your work here? Several of our healthcare clients have been asking for more patient-centered marketing approaches. Your perspective could be valuable in developing those strategies. The suggestion surprised me. I had been keeping my marketing career and this emerging advocacy work separate in my mind, unsure how they might intersect. I hadn't thought about connecting them, I admitted. Think about it, Diane encouraged. This could be a unique positioning for both you and our agency. Not many marketers have direct experience navigating complex healthcare systems as patients. That insight is valuable. The conversation opened a new possibility, integrating my personal experience and advocacy work into my professional identity rather than compartmentalizing them. It was a direction I needed time to consider carefully. As Thanksgiving approached, I prepared for the complicated family dynamics awaiting me. The workshop development had clarified my thinking about boundaries and communication, giving me precise language for what I needed from Rebecca before any meaningful reconciliation could occur. Rather than dreading the interaction, I felt equipped to manage it without compromising my core requirements for a healthier relationship. When I arrived at my parents' home for dessert as planned, Rebecca was helping my mother clear the dinner dishes. She looked up as I entered, her expression carefully neutral. Olivia, you made it. For dessert, as I told Mom, I replied, setting down the pumpkin cheesecake I had brought. Happy Thanksgiving. We moved through the initial awkwardness with practiced family maneuvers, discussing neutral topics like my father's new woodworking hobby and my mother's community garden project. Rebecca mentioned a promotion at her financial firm, and I congratulated her genuinely, able to separate my issues with her behavior from recognition of her professional accomplishments. After dessert, as my father and mother became absorbed in a debate about the optimal timing for pruning their fruit trees, Rebecca approached me in the kitchen where I was rinsing dessert plates. Mom says you're developing some kind of patient advocacy program, she began, leaning against the counter beside me. Based on what happened with your recovery, I nodded, maintaining my focus on the task at hand. Yes, helping patients protect their treatment plans when faced with interference or challenges navigating the healthcare system. Rebecca was quiet for a moment before asking, Am I the villain in this story you're sharing? The question was more direct than I had expected from her. I turned off the water and faced her. You're an example of a common dynamic, someone who believes they know better than both the patient and their medical team, and takes actions that undermine prescribed care. Whether that makes you a villain depends on your willingness to recognize the harm those actions caused. She flinched slightly at my frankness. I was trying to help you. I still believe dependency on medical systems can delay recovery. That belief contradicts established medical evidence, I replied evenly. And regardless, it wasn't your decision to make. You violated my autonomy and actively sabotaged treatment my doctors deemed necessary. The result was measurable setbacks in my recovery that could have been avoided. Rebecca's expression tightened. You always were stubborn about accepting different perspectives. This isn't about stubbornness or perspectives, I countered. It's about respecting boundaries and acknowledging harm. My workshop teaches patients to protect themselves from exactly the kind of interference you imposed, whether it comes from insurance companies, healthcare providers, or well-meaning family members who overreach. So I'm just a cautionary tale in your presentations, she said, her tone bitter. Actually, you could be a story of growth and reconciliation, I offered. If you were willing to acknowledge that regardless of your intentions, your actions caused harm and violated my right to direct my own medical care. Our eyes met in a moment of genuine connection, the first in nearly 2 years. I could see her struggling with her pride, her lifelong certainty that she knew best, and her genuine belief that she had been helping me. For a fleeting moment, I thought she might bridge the gap between us with a simple acknowledgement of impact over intention. Instead, she straightened her posture and reached for her practiced professional smile. Well, I'm glad your recovery has progressed so well despite everything. and I hope your workshop helps others navigate their situations effectively. It was a polite withdrawal rather than an engagement with the core issue, but it was also free from the dismissive tone she had used in previous interactions. Perhaps it represented a small step toward eventual understanding, or perhaps it was simply a recognition that I would no longer accept her behavior as I had in the past. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed since the accident. Physically, I had adapted to new limitations while reclaiming most of my former capabilities. Professionally, I was exploring an unexpected integration of personal experience and career development. And relationally, I had established healthier boundaries with my family, while deepening connections with friends who had proven their genuine support. Most significantly, I had developed a clear understanding of what true help looks like versus controlling behavior disguised as assistance. True help respects autonomy, offers support without imposing conditions, acknowledges the recipient's expertise about their own experience, and prioritizes their stated needs over the helper's assumptions. This clarity was now benefiting not only me but also the patients participating in my workshop. The accident that had nearly destroyed my life had ultimately transformed it in ways I could never have anticipated, creating opportunities to help others navigate similar challenges. Every participant who left my workshop better equipped to protect their care represented a positive outcome from an experience that could have remained simply traumatic. As I pulled into my apartment parking lot, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was from the woman with MS who had spoken so insightfully during the workshop. "I used your communication framework with my well-meaning but overbearing mother today," she wrote. "For the first time, she actually heard me when I explained what I need versus what she thinks I need. Thank you for giving me the words to express what I've been feeling for years." Messages like this confirmed that I was on the right path. My experience, though painful, had created something valuable for others facing similar challenges. In sharing my story and the strategies I had developed, I was transforming a personal ordeal into a resource that empowered others to protect their care and maintain their autonomy during vulnerable times. This realization brought a sense of purpose that transcended the losses and limitations resulting from the accident. My recovery journey had become something larger than my individual experience. It had become a map that others could use to navigate their own complex medical situations with greater confidence and clarity. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.